You know what's really hard? Starting a new car company. And you know what's even harder? Keeping it going. There are so few examples of actually successful new startups making cars in the US that have kept it going. Obviously, Tesla's the one everyone knows that's become successful. They've had their whole master plan. And then what else have we gotten really that's new? Rivian is one. Lucid is the other one, and they're hanging on, but like there have been so many others that have started, tried, and failed since then. And this is early January, so it's CES week, which always reminds me because I always see so many of these kind of fledgling companies that start with new ideas but don't actually get anywhere. And I don't want to call them vapor, but it's like I see these concept cars at CES and I'm like, that's never coming out. But there are some that actually do want to come out. And so this video is going to be me ranking some of the startup companies and startup EVs that I've seen that aren't shipping yet, but that might have something to them. They haven't actually come out, but there may be some ideas behind them that we do actually want to come out because competition is good. So here's my startup tier list ranking EVs. Now, before I get into these companies, real quick, just keep in mind the context of what actually worked, right? We have all these super old car companies in the US. Tesla comes along with their master plan, which is starting with a high-priced, low-volume vehicle, Tesla Roadster, and then moving to a not as high-priced but higher volume vehicle, Tesla Model S, and eventually making it to the mass production Model 3 and Model Y that much more people can afford. That's how they actually pulled this off. If you're going to be a new startup in the US, you not only need a master plan that's going to work, but you also need a differentiator that's a little bit different. So I'm sitting in a Rivian. The Rivian thing was the adventure vehicle. It's a pickup truck. It was one of the first EVs to actually work as a pickup. And the Lucid they're kind of still in the high price, low volume segment, but I still think they're trying to work their way down in price as well with higher materials and stuff and better efficiency. So that's what's worked so far. So vehicle number one I'd like to talk about, or company number one, Faraday Future. So Faraday Future was founded in 2014, and the vehicle that they showed was the Faraday Future FF91. You might remember on the MKBHD channel, I actually made a video with the FF91 in 2017. This was when they showed me a production spec version they wanted to ship, and they also showed me an engineering prototype that could drive. So it was like a finished looking car and a finished driving car separately, and soon they would combine them and start shipping the thing. They haven't gotten that far yet. They've run out of money several times in the process trying to get there. Their differentiator, though, was this was going to be a super elite, extremely luxury, but also high performance SUV. So the FF91 was like 1,000 horsepower. It would have triple electric motors, 142 kilowatt hour battery pack, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, typical like crazy EV startup specs. They also had a bunch of self-driving tech attached to it that they demoed for me. And the starting price would be $309,000. So they've had to find a market for this. Again, it's a cool car, but like you have to find people who are willing to buy a $300,000 car from a new company, and then who's going to service it, and also all these other things too, which are a challenge. So yeah, it hasn't come out yet, and it doesn't look likely to ever actually happen. So I'm giving Faraday Future a C. They're C tier. I think even if they did bring it to production, it's not anything so amazing or groundbreakingly new that it would have done much. It wouldn't have made much of a dent. I think they could move a few thousand units a year. Just being super expensive is going to price you out. And, you know, they're at CES every year showing new brand stuff that they want to do. But yeah, they're kind of they've been at this for a while. I just kind of want to highlight that I'm being watched right now. I don't know if you can see that, but I think they're slick by turning around. But I see you. Faraday Future, C. All right, next up, Lordstown Motors. Now, some of you might remember that name, the Lordstown Endurance. It was founded in 2018, this company, and they were supposed to make a pickup truck, a consumer pickup truck, the Endurance. Now, here's the thing. This was early. Again, this was before Rivian. This was before any F-150 Lightning. This was before any Cybertruck. So the unique thing about it was supposed to be, one, that it's a pickup truck, and two, the hub-mounted motors. Now, the pickup truck part itself I thought was pretty solid. It had a decent looking design, not too crazy. It had those cool lights or whatever. It had a normal sized bed. It would have a 440 horsepower powertrain, 8,000 pounds of towing capacity is not terrible. I think it would have about 174 miles of range though, which is not that high. But overall, it would have been one of the first EV pickup trucks. Unfortunately, they never got enough financial momentum to actually get it there. And I think they ended up having to pivot to fleet stuff, and we just don't really have the Lordstown pickup truck today as they would have liked. I'm going to give the Lordstown an E, because it's not... Here's the thing. If they actually finished it and actually shipped it today as what they'd planned, it still wouldn't actually be that interesting. I'll tell you why. The hub-mounted motors seem cool, right? And this would have been a $65,000 truck if they had actually been successful. But the thing about the hub-mounted motors is they say that this would have been great for efficiency, but they never really got or advertised particularly amazing efficiency numbers. And the other thing about hub-mounted motors, so we have these EVs that we've seen everywhere now. It's a battery pack and the motor's on the axle, but they wanted to mount the motors at each wheel, basically in each wheel, which would have made this a quad motor all-wheel drive pickup truck, which sounds really smart. But the thing about having the motor unsprung, being in the wheel instead of sprung by the suspension, unsprung mass is so important for vehicle dynamics. And if you want this truck to be at all off-road capable or even drive particularly well, having all of that weight in the wheels would not have been a good trade-off, because the truck's not actually more efficient. So anyway, long story short, poor execution on what turned out to not really be that great of an idea, which is why we don't see hub motors everywhere today. At least not yet. Maybe the technology has improved and it is way more efficient now. We might see that later, but the way Lordstown had it set up, never really had any momentum. So Lordstown, E tier. So next up, Aptera Motors. Oh, it is way too cold for a cat to be hanging out outside, but hey, it's Carney. That's what they do. Aptera Motors. Okay, you might have heard this name before, and they are like teetering. They are teetering on allegedly actually shipping a bunch of these things. But the Aptera car was supposed to just efficiency max, maximum efficiency EV. And the idea of that is pretty interesting. This was a small 3-wheeled car that had solar panels on it, whose primary goal was to be as efficient as possible. Minimum rolling resistance, maximum aerodynamic efficiency, the most possible range out of the least possible energy. And that is an appealing idea if you can actually ship it at a low enough price that it feels like it's actually worth it. So they were founded in 2006, believe it or not, long time ago, and they have been sort of born and reborn several times since then. But the idea was that this would have a 400-mile range, and the solar panels would get you in a sunny place up to 40 miles of free range per day, because it's so efficient that just a tiny bit of energy from the sun can get you 40 miles, and it would be only $30,000. That's the idea. That was the idea. So look, I think it's noble to want to design the most efficient vehicle possible, but as far as that actual vehicle coming to market, I'm putting the Aptera in my D tier. It's just hard to imagine a tiny passenger vehicle like that succeeding in America. I think it might have a better chance in Europe and some places where smaller cars are more popular, but I just do not want to be in that on the road. Yes, people buy motorcycles, but the Aptera is not a performance-focused EV. It's just in a niche of a niche that it just doesn't feel like it's going to work. Now, they are, like I said, teetering. I think they just partnered with Pininfarina and are going to do design with the former design house that did work for Ferrari. And like, they've had thousands and thousands of reservations, and they have very vocal fans. You might see them in the comments below of people who really want this thing and believe in it and want it to ship. But it's been teetering for a long time, so it doesn't feel like they're about to be everywhere on the roads. We could be wrong, but it's my D tier. So the next up is a company called Canoo. They're a little bit more of a confusing one. They started in 2017, and their differentiator was just mainly going to just be design. So they had these EVs that actually, one of them was like a pickup truck, one of them was a van. They had a couple models that they showed people, And honestly, I think the design was pretty sweet. It's what got a lot of people's attention. I think the idea of having this cool van that could roll around and be totally silent and efficient was appealing at the time. They would have a 200-mile range and maybe 200 to 350 horsepower and 80 kilowatt hour battery pack. And they would start at around $43,000 for both models. Again, never really got the financials in place. And I think they've shifted to fleet and started doing stuff like postal vans and a couple other more fleet-oriented vehicles. So there is no like mass market canoe. And they've, again, confusingly, they've also talked about this modular platform that they're going to start. I'm not even going to get into the details of that, but I think it would have been cool if we had that initial van concept or that initial small truck concept with that sweet design actually come out. And at that price, it would have been neat. There wasn't anything technologically super cool about it that would have set it apart. It would have just been a design play. And so just for that, I'm going to put it in C tier. If they executed on that at the price they promised with that cool design, I think people would have really loved it. Okay, next up, the Aptera car. Now, this one is interesting. This one's kind of pure CES. The Sony car. So you might remember at CES in like 2023, I guess 2 years ago, they first showed this off. Now, keep in mind, I've been to a lot of CESs. I've seen a lot of random cars at CES that are never going to ship. I go to the Sony booth, and there's a car sitting there. Cool, Sony, you make screens and a couple other things that could be in cars, but a whole car seems a little crazy. But now it's 2025, and they've continued showing this off and are actually announcing that they're going to do this. They're going to have a price. It's going to start at $90,000. It's going to be NACS, and they're partnering with Honda for a lot of the other car stuff, which actually makes it feel like it could really come out. I don't know if they're trying to do it this year or next year or what, but it feels like a solid EV with a good enough range. It has a reasonable design, and they're saying it's going to have something like a 300-mile range, 480 horsepower, 91 kilowatt-hour battery. And then, of course, Sony makes a lot of sensors. They make camera sensors. They're emphasizing heavily the self-driving aspect, or at least the ADAS aspect of this car, so it would be high-tech enough that maybe it could be a Tesla alternative. In a world where people are looking for Tesla alternatives, this does feel like it could find success. And then you have Honda and Sony who have enough money, ideally enough resources to bring it to market. This feels, as weird as it sounds, this feels like it could actually happen. I don't know if there's going to be a Sony logo on the steering wheel or anything like that, but the Aptera, I'm going to put it in B tier. Nothing too crazy about it. Could be one of the first NACS, well, probably not one of the first, but NACS car. Nice. So then, okay, other side of the CES car coin, the Dyson EV. Similar thing. You hear Dyson making a car, and then you go to the Dyson booth, and they're like, yeah, we're going to make a car. And you're like, okay, Dyson, you make electric motors, so there's that. And they've had a long history of being a little bit crazy about making things outside of their normal products. But yeah, you know, cool. Be innovative. So they said they're going to do a car, and they had some pretty crazy specs to go with it. They wanted to have a large 7-seater SUV doing 600 miles of range with a 150 kilowatt-hour battery. And it would have 500 horsepower and do 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. And it would have a base price of $184,000. So that's kind of all the details we have. And again, then it's like, who's gonna buy a Dyson car when, you know, they don't have a Honda-like partner as far as I've seen them announced. They're just Dyson, and then there's got to be Dyson car dealerships and Dyson service centers and all this a Dyson logo. I don't know. It just seems a little weird. There's not really enough story for me to grasp onto. There's not enough technological difference that would make me want to pay twice what you could get a regular car for, 3 times, 180 grand. Dang. Yeah, I'm giving the Dyson. That's going to be F tier. I don't think that's going to happen. So then last but not least, Fisker. Fisker is a startup company making EVs in the US, and they have also had a troubled, rocky past. They had this weird hybrid. They went out of business. They came back. The Fisker Ocean is the latest of what we have to evaluate from Fisker. and they are currently out of business now, but the vehicle that they plan on shipping, if we just look at the fundamentals of what they were promising, was actually pretty close. I mean, we clearly had one here. It got onto the roads. It started actually shipping, and it was pretty promising. 350-mile range. Pretty decent looking design. It was a large-ish crossover SUV with a lot of trunk space. It would have about 470 horsepower. There were some interesting things, like they would have a solar roof option, which could be cool in California-like places. And I think they would have probably been up to switching to NACS by now. And they were going to start at $40,000 to $60,000. Unfortunately, their story was really just a matter of probably just letting the cookies out of the oven a little too early. Like their idea of a product would have been very popular, but they never shipped more than about a few thousand of them. And the software issues they had, the bugginess, the quality control issues that they had could have been overcome, but their reputation and their lack of competent management, I think, would be the things that took them down and that eventually they couldn't recover from. So the idea of the vehicle and the thing that could have added to competition to Tesla here in the US, I think Fisker might as well be A tier. I mean, they had a car on the road for a reason. People were buying the thing. There are still Fisker fans to this day. And the idea of a 350-mile SUV that has a bunch of space and looks pretty good, like, people want that. It doesn't even... Here's an interesting compliment to that car. It didn't really look super electric, if that makes sense. Like, I see a couple EVs out there, like the Lyriq looks very electric with those lights, and the EV6 looks super electric, and the Rivian, obviously, with those headlights, they all look super electric. I think the Fisker served the best chance of getting normal people to go, oh yeah, I think I'd want to buy one. So that's why it's A tier, but obviously things didn't work out in the end. They didn't weather the storm in any sustainable way. So that's it. That's my tier list. Thank you, CES, for the motivation. Hopefully we see some more cars that are not vapor that actually do come out. Not that Tesla's immune from vapor in the first place. Do you remember the Roadster? That thing's 2017 announcement still hasn't come out. Jesus.